Have you ever knelt down and felt that your words didn't make it past the ceiling? Have you ever cried out until you lost all strength and, even then, noticed no movement in heaven? Perhaps you have wept in silence thinking that God had forgotten you, or that your faith was not enough. But what I am about to reveal now is something few have the courage to say. It is not always a lack of faith. It is not always God's absence. There is something hidden, a spiritual weight that works like an invisible barrier, something that might be in your life at this very moment, an hidden object that blocks the prayer of the chosen ones. This message is not here to bring easy comfort. It is a summons, a revelation that can change the way you understand every unanswered prayer, every tear shed in vain, every night when heaven's silence seemed to crush your soul. Because there is a mystery that almost no one reveals. The chosen do not suffer in silence by accident. They are led to face obstacles that others will never face. And among these obstacles, the most painful is the spiritual blockage that slips in silently, like a shadow that hides the light of the answer. From the very beginning, the lives of the chosen have never been ordinary. While many experience seemingly easy paths, open doors, and quick answers, the chosen walk through thorny trails, endure long deserts, and feel the weight of rejection and loneliness. They know what it means to carry a pain that cannot be explained in words. How many times have you felt out of place, as if the whole world followed a logic you could never keep up with, while others seem satisfied with fleeting achievements? You carry within you a restlessness, a thirst that nothing quenches. It is as if there were a crack open in your soul, a hunger for something greater that cannot be found in this world. This invisible pain is the seal of the chosen. It is not punishment. It is not bad luck. It is evidence that your life has been set apart for something that transcends the ordinary. But along with that seal comes a constant battle, the feeling that your prayers are suspended in the air, that heaven remains silent, that the answers never arrive. And here is the wound that almost no one dares to expose. Many chosen ones believe they are not heard, that God does not answer because he does not love them, or because something in their faith is broken. This is the deception that destroys souls. Because the truth is that there is a blockage, a hidden object that places itself between you and the flow of answers. There is no greater pain than praying and hearing only the echo of your own voice. The silence of God for the chosen is like an invisible sword. It cuts deep without leaving external marks, but it makes you bleed within. You know this pain. To kneel, to cry out, to wait, and nothing. The heart fills with questions. Did he forget me? Am I not worthy? Am I alone in this desert? Silence is pedagogical. It molds, it separates, it trains. But when there is a hidden blockage, that silence becomes unbearable, because it is not just apparent absence, it is real interruption. It is as if the river of prayer were running strong, but along the way someone had built an invisible dam. The water piles up, the pressure rises, but nothing flows through. This blockage is not always visible. It does not show up in diagnoses. It cannot be detected by human eyes. It is subtle, hidden in details, present in objects, memories, invisible pacts, things that seem harmless but become spiritual chains. Another mark in the lives of the chosen is loss. They lose early, they lose often, they lose without understanding. Relationships that seemed solid collapse without warning, friends disappear without explanation, opportunities that seemed perfect slam shut at the last moment. These losses are not accidental. They are surgical cuts made by heaven itself. But when they happen, the heart cannot comprehend. The pain speaks louder. You look back and see a trail of things that never blossomed, of dreams that died before being born, of doors that closed brutally. And with each loss, the same question repeats. Why me? Why always me? This repetition is not coincidence. It is evidence of an invisible battle underway. And when these losses are added to the silence of God, the weight becomes crushing. It is at this point that many think of giving up. But it is also at this point that the chosen need to open their eyes to the mystery. There is something hidden that blocks, that prevents, that locks the flow. If there is something the chosen know intimately, it is rejection. They may try to fit in, but there will always be an invisible wall that separates them. There will always be eyes that do not recognize them, doors that do not open, arms that do not embrace. Rejection hurts because it touches identity. It makes you believe you have no value, that you are not enough, that you will always be less. But rejection is, in truth, a form of separation. It is heaven saying, "You do not belong to this. You were set apart for something greater. The problem is that when rejection combines with silence and losses, the heart of the chosen shatters. They begin to believe they are invisible, that their life is only a series of purposeless pains. And it is precisely at this moment that spiritual blockage finds room, because misinterpreted pain creates openings, and through those openings enter hidden objects, symbols, memories, ties that turn into walls against prayer. There is a forgotten prophecy that speaks about this, a prophecy that almost no one preaches because it does not bring immediate comfort, but raw truth. This prophecy says that in the end times many chosen would cry out, but they would not be answered until they identified the hidden object that blocked their prayers. This object is not necessarily physical, though sometimes it is. At times it is a memory held onto, a wound never healed, a resentment that turned into a chain. Other times it is literally an object inside the home, a gift carrying contrary spiritual energy, a symbol that seems harmless but holds a curse. The hidden object can also be a belief, a word spoken against you that was never rejected, something said over your life that entered your soul like an arrow and continues acting as poison. And every time you pray, that word raised against you works like a barrier, like an unbroken contract. That is why so many chosen feel their prayer never goes anywhere. They kneel, they cry out, they weep, but the echo returns, because something is in the way. Imagine writing a long letter, soaked in tears, and handing it to the mailman, believing it will reach its destination. But on the way, someone intercepts it and hides it in a dark drawer. It never arrives. That is the feeling of the chosen. Letters sent, but never received. Prayers get stuck in invisible drawers. The cry is real, but there is no return. This generates despair, revolt, the feeling of abandonment. But the forgotten prophecy declares, none of this is in vain. This blockage is not permanent. It is revealed at the right time, so that the chosen may understand that their prayer does not depend only on effort, but on discernment. Have you ever noticed that no matter how much you pray, no matter how much you fast, no matter how much you cry out, there are moments when heaven remains closed? Have you ever felt that your words rose like arrows, but struck an invisible wall and fell back upon you? That feeling is not imagination, nor spiritual weakness. It is evidence that something blocks, something hides, something rises silently to prevent the connection between the heart of the chosen and the throne of God. This blockage is not visible to common eyes. It is like a shadow hiding behind circumstances, like a subtle barrier that cannot be measured but is felt in every unanswered prayer. Many call it a test, others call it chance, but the truth is that there is a hidden object, not physical, but spiritual, that acts as a weight upon the soul. And this object does not arrive by accident. It enters the life of the chosen in silence, disguised, often even received as something harmless. Since ancient times, prophets and saints warned about objects and symbols that carried spiritual energies. Not everything that seems beautiful is pure. Not everything that seems harmless is neutral. Some objects function like keys that lock instead of open. They are like invisible seals that prevent prayer from flowing. And the most painful reality is that, many times, the chosen do not even know they are living with this anchor inside their home, their mind, their heart. Imagine carrying a stone tied around your neck while trying to swim. That is the spiritual sensation many of the elect feel. They strive, they dive deep into faith, they do everything they have been taught, but something pulls them down. This invisible force is fed by what should never have been present, but was tolerated, and heaven, in silence, watches, waiting for the moment when the chosen one finally perceives what is wrong. The chosen are not ordinary people. The spiritual weight upon them is infinitely greater, because the calling is also greater. And that is why certain objects, whether memories, symbols, invisible spiritual bonds, or even emotional keepsakes, become disguised prisons. While others may live normally surrounded by anything, the chosen cannot. For them, what is mere decoration to others can become a chain. What is a simple keepsake to others can become a spiritual prison. It is at this point that the deepest pain emerges, God's silence in the face of your cry. You pray, but it feels like your voice never breaks through. You fast, but nothing seems to move. You ask for signs, but everything remains dark. It is as if heaven had gone on strike against you. But it is not punishment. It is revelation in disguise. God allows silence to stretch so that you realize it is not your prayer that is weak, but that something is intercepting. Like radio waves blocked by static, your faith is real, but there is hidden noise, an invisible barrier. That noise is the spiritual object that blocks, and until it is removed, the flow of answers will not come. The lives of the chosen have always been marked by losses, rejections, and loneliness. But now you begin to understand that even those deserts were showing something greater, because in silence you are forced to look not only upward, but inward, at what you still carry and should have released a long time ago. Many objects that block prayer have no physical form. They can be grudges held, words never released, promises never broken. They are invisible covenants made with old wounds. Every memory you insist on holding like a knife in your chest acts as an obstacle. God wants to fill your hands with answers, but your hands are still occupied holding things that no longer nourish your soul. And there is yet another deeper layer: spiritual objects that pass through generations. Many times the chosen carry weights that are not theirs, but inherited. Words spoken by ancestors, vows made by entire families, symbols passed down as inheritance. These objects do not appear on inventories, but they inhabit the spirit. And until they are recognized, they continue to operate as invisible walls. That is why the silence hurts so much. Because you feel that your prayer is sincere, you feel that your heart cries out with truth, and yet nothing seems to break through heaven. The pain is not from lack of faith. The pain is because something hidden is interfering. And this pain multiplies because, as a chosen one, you were never born to carry common weights. Every blockage upon you carries double weight, because the enemy fears the intensity of your calling. At this moment, perhaps you are asking yourself, but what is this object in my case? How can I identify it? How can I remove it? The answer is not simple, but it is clear. That which holds you in the invisible always reveals its face in your deepest pain. The hidden object that blocks your prayers is tied to the wound that follows you the most. If your greatest pain has been rejection, the hidden object may lie in the memory of words you have never been able to forget. If your greatest pain has been loss, the hidden object may be the memory you insist on feeding. If your greatest pain is loneliness, perhaps the object is the silent pact of believing you do not deserve love. Every unanswered prayer is a mirror showing you where the blockage is hidden. It is no coincidence. The silence of God always points to something that must be torn out. And here is the hard yet liberating truth. There is no prayer strong enough to break a blockage that you yourself continue to feed. Heaven cannot pour out the new while you insist on holding on to the old. That is why so many chosen ones spend years crying out without seeing change. Not because God does not hear, but because he waits for the hardest decision, to release the hidden object. At this point, silence becomes school, and waiting becomes discipline, because only those who learn to release discover what it means to receive. God's silence is, therefore, the warning. He does not respond because he knows his voice would be drowned out by the noise of the hidden object. He does not send an answer because he knows your soul could not fully receive it while still imprisoned. So heaven falls silent, and this silence pushes you toward reflection. The pain you feel at not being answered is precisely the lamp that illuminates the hidden object. What hurts you most probably points to what needs to be released. Think carefully. If your greatest pain is a relationship that ended, perhaps something material or spiritual still connects you to that story. If your greatest pain is a loss, perhaps you still carry symbols that keep your soul tied to what is gone. If your greatest pain is rejection, perhaps you still live trying to prove your worth to people who will never recognize your essence. Each unanswered prayer is a mirror showing what still blocks. It is at this point that the cry becomes school, because while you insist on asking for what does not flow, God is waiting for you to ask, "What should I release?" And here is the profound mystery. It is not God who removes the hidden object. It is you who decides to surrender it. He can point, he can show, he can even disturb you until you realize it, but the choice is yours. Because faith is not only asking, faith is renouncing. The chosen ones are called to walk in territories where no one else can walk, and this requires them to be free from unnecessary weights. As long as you insist on carrying the old, you will not reach the new. As long as you keep what should have been burned, your prayer will remain locked. The hidden object, therefore, is not only an obstacle, it is also a revealer. It shows how far you are willing to go for your liberation. It reveals whether your faith is only petition or also decision. It separates those who seek easy miracles from those who accept paying the price of renunciation. And when finally the chosen one rises and decides to release, whether a memory, whether a resentment, whether a physical symbol, something changes in the invisible world. Heaven, which was silent before, opens in response. The prayer, which before hit the ceiling, now pierces through like a sure arrow. What before seemed blocked, now flows, because the secret was never in praying louder, but in releasing deeper. The moment you identify the hidden object is as if a curtain were torn inside your soul. Everything that before seemed confused begins to take shape. God's silence, which before seemed like punishment, reveals itself as an urgent call. Clean the altar. Restore the temple. Uproot what does not belong to the light. But this process is never easy, because the hidden object often hides in the most beloved things. It may be a memory you don't want to release because it was also the moment when you felt most alive. It may be a person who hurt you, but whose name is still attached to your prayers. It may be a physical object that seems innocent, but carries the energy of an invisible pact. God, however, does not compete with secret idols. He does not share space on the altar of your life. Either he occupies everything or he falls silent. And it is at this point that many chosen ones fight their greatest battles, not against external demons, but against their own internal resistance. Because it is not easy to give up what was once important. It is not simple to release what is connected to the heart. But heaven only opens when the sacrifice is made. The chosen ones need to understand that it is not enough just to pray. One must discern. It is not enough just to cry out. One must surrender. What blocks prayer is not the lack of words, but the presence of bonds that were never cut. Imagine that your soul is a house with many doors and windows. You pray asking for light to enter, but you keep the curtains closed. You ask for the wind of the Spirit to blow, but you keep the windows locked. You ask for liberation, but still keep chains in secret rooms. The hidden object is exactly that. The curtain that was not opened, the key you never turned, the chain you insist on holding. And as long as this is not released, heaven remains silent. This silence, however, is pedagogical. It teaches without words. It shows without explaining. It presses until your soul recognizes there is something deeper to be done. How many times have you already asked yourself why, even while praying, everything seemed stuck? How many times have you questioned the reason your faith does not bear fruit? How many times have you felt that your voice was lost in the void? Perhaps it was not lack of faith, but excess of invisible bonds. The chosen ones are called to levels of purity that others will never experience. Therefore, they cannot carry anything contaminated. What is tolerable for the common person is poison for them. What is memory for the world is prison for them. That is why their deserts are longer, their loss is more painful, their silence is deeper, because their life is not common. Their calling demands more. The hidden object is also a test. It asks in silence, "Do you love me more, or what is held in your hands?" This question echoes in the early mornings, in moments of prayer, in losses that make no sense. And until the answer is given with actions, heaven remains quiet. But the instant you decide to surrender, something breaks. The atmosphere changes. What seemed blocked begins to flow. The prayer, before suffocated, now runs like a river released between stones. Silence transforms into voice. Absence transforms into presence. And here is the secret. It is not that God did not want to answer. It is that he was waiting for your surrender. The chosen ones only find fullness when they understand that the altar cannot be divided. God's fire only descends upon complete sacrifices. Heaven only opens for whole hearts. The hidden object needs to be placed in the fire, because only then does prayer find a free path. This process is so profound that it becomes an identity mark. The chosen ones are known in heaven not only for their tears, but for the sacrifices they made. Each bond cut, each object burned, each memory surrendered is recorded as eternal testimony. And the most beautiful thing is that, when the hidden object is destroyed, there is not only emptiness left. God fills it with something new. Loss opens space for presence. Renunciation opens space for revelation. Sacrifice opens space for glory. What seemed like death reveals itself as life. What seemed like pain transforms into liberation. What seemed like silence manifests as answer. Then you realize that the hidden object was never just an obstacle. It was the path to a deeper encounter with the eternal. It was the key that, once released, opens doors that before seemed closed forever. And that is why the life of the chosen ones is marked by such intense ruptures. Because each rupture opens space for something greater. Each silence points to a revelation. Each loss prepares for a victory that cannot be explained in words. You who carry this hidden pain need to understand, nothing is in vain. The silence that wounded you was also the silence that prepared you. The object that blocked you was also the object that pushed you closer to the truth. The weight that seemed to crush you was also the weight that strengthened your faith. Now is the moment to rise, look within, and ask, what do I still need to release? This is the prayer that unlocks heaven. This is the key that opens invisible doors. This is the surrender that transforms silence into answer. The hidden object does not define you. It only reveals how far you are willing to go for the calling you carry. And when finally you take your stand and decide to surrender, the atmosphere changes not only in you, but in everything around you. The home fills with peace. Prayers begin to have weight. Words, once fragile, become swords. And your life, once marked by blockages, becomes a testimony of liberation. This is the mystery that few reveal, but that today opens before you. Heaven remains silent not to punish you, but to lead you to the altar of surrender. The hidden object is not only an enemy, it is a teacher. It taught you that nothing, absolutely nothing, can occupy the place of the eternal. And this is how the prayer of the chosen ones finally finds the free path, when the heart becomes a pure altar, without shadows, without weights, without chains. Have you ever felt that your prayer hit an invisible wall? Have you cried until you lost your strength, believing that God had covered his ears to your cry? This is the secret agony of the chosen ones. No matter how much they surrender, no matter how many early mornings they spend on their knees, there are always moments when heaven seems mute, heavy, closed. And it is exactly in this silence that the spiritual battle reaches its apex. The chosen one does not face only external problems. He fights against an internal void that threatens to shatter his faith. It is like walking in an endless desert, feeling that each step consumes more life than it returns. The sun of doubt burns, the wind of rejection lashes, and the sand of losses seeps into every open wound. But behind this scene of desolation, there is something that few understand. God's silence is never absence. It is always construction. The problem is that the human mind cannot comprehend the immediate purpose, and so the soul screams, believing it is alone. The hidden object that blocks prayer is, often, the key to this enigma. It is like a shadow hidden in a corner of the soul, invisible even to the one who carries it. It may be disguised in habits, in memories, in relationships that seem harmless, but its weight is real. It drains the energy from prayer, weakens the flame of faith, and little by little creates a barrier between the cry and the answer. That is why the chosen ones suffer more, because it is not enough to pray with words, one must pray with surrender. It is not enough to cry out, one must renounce. And this is the test that separates the common from those who were marked by the eternal. Imagine a soul kneeling in the middle of the night, holding in their hands not only the open Bible, but also memories that should have been left behind. Each tear that falls on the sacred pages carries with it the weight of a past that was not released. And as long as this remains on the altar, the answer does not come. The pain occurs when the chosen one realizes that they cannot advance without letting something die. And this hurts because it is not just giving up a physical object, but tearing out roots that grew inside the soul itself. It is burying memories, cutting ties, destroying illusions. And yet, it is exactly at this breaking point that revelation begins to shine, because surrender opens space, renunciation opens doors, sacrifice releases the path. The hidden object is not only an obstacle, it is also proof. It asks without words, how far are you willing to go for what God called you to live? The chosen ones discover that each blockage is, in fact, a summons. Silence is not punishment, but invitation. The desert is not abandonment, but training. Loneliness is not rejection, but separation. Everything points to the same destiny, a life marked by divine presence, even if forged in the fire of apparent absence. As you read these words, perhaps you can identify your hidden object. Perhaps it is a relationship you insist on holding on to, even knowing it distances you from God. Perhaps it is a fear you keep deep in your chest, without the courage to surrender. Perhaps it is an emotional dependency, a resentment, a secret habit. Whatever it is, know this. As long as you do not place this object on the altar, Your prayer will continue to be blocked. But the moment you decide to release it, the atmosphere changes. Silence transforms into voice, absence into presence, pain into liberation. This is the point where the chosen ones become truly different, because they understand that they were not called to accumulate, but to renounce. They were not called to carry useless weights, but to open the way for the fire of the Spirit. Heaven does not remain silent because you do not have faith. Heaven remains silent because it awaits your surrender, because God does not negotiate with the hidden. He waits for you yourself to identify, uproot, and surrender. And when this happens, when finally the object is placed before the altar, something supernatural happens. It is as if the weight that was always on your shoulders suddenly disappeared. It is as if invisible chains fell with a crash. It is as if doors that had been locked for years opened all at once. This is the climax of transformation, the instant when the chosen one understands that they were never alone, that the silence was only the setting for a deeper process, that each tear was recorded, each prayer was kept, each pain was used as a brick in the construction of an unshakable faith. Now what before was a wound becomes a scar of authority. What before was weight becomes testimony. What before was silence becomes prophetic voice. The chosen one, after going through this process, is no longer the same. Their prayer is no longer fragile, it is a sword. Their faith is no longer theory, it is survival. Their life is no longer marked only by pain but by purpose. And that is when heaven finally speaks, not with common words, but with undeniable signs, not with superficial answers, but with profound revelations. Because those who learned to endure silence now have the maturity to carry the voice. God's silence is never empty. It is full of codes, symbols, and lessons that only the chosen ones can decipher. But until realizing this, the soul screams, struggles, questions. This process is like being placed inside an invisible furnace where the heat is unbearable, but necessary to mold the essence. The hidden object that blocked prayer when not identified is like a persistent shadow that accompanies every step. You pray, but feel the weight. You fast, but something remains trapped. You seek answers, but the doors remain locked. The mind begins to believe it is a curse, that it is divine rejection, that it is cruel destiny. But Revelation shows that it is none of that. It is just a purification process that requires courage to let go. How many chosen ones despaired for not understanding this mystery? How many rebelled against God, thinking He had forgotten them? But the truth is that this silence was always proof of love, because if God answered immediately, you would never learn to differentiate what comes from heaven and what comes from distractions. Spiritual maturity is born from delay. The weight of waiting is what strengthens the invisible musculature of the soul. Silence is the secret school where God teaches lessons that cannot be learned in crowds. It is there that you discover the value of each tear, the strength of each sleepless night, the depth of each loss. And when the hidden object is finally revealed, everything makes sense. You realize that what you held on to was not just a detail, it was the root of many pains. It was the chain that kept the heart tied to the past. It was the shadow that muffled the flame of prayer. It was the invisible thread that interrupted the connection with the eternal. By releasing it, you discover that God's silence was not abandonment, but protection. Because if the answer had come earlier, it would have been wasted. If the blessing had come too soon, it would have been lost. The delay was, in fact, divine care. And then the most transformative moment of the journey happens. The instant when you surrender completely, not just with words, but with actions. You decide that nothing is more important than God's presence. You surrender memories, people, objects, dependencies. You place everything on the altar, and when the fire consumes, heaven opens. In this moment, prayer ceases to be just petition and becomes dialogue. Silence is filled with subtle signs that only the trained heart can hear. An inexplicable peace floods the soul. An unshakable certainty takes over the spirit. It is not a common answer. It is a revelation. The chosen ones, upon going through this process, become living references. They do not speak only of spiritual theories. They carry marks. Their scars are testimony that they endured silence and survived. And that is why they have authority to console others who are still in the process. The silent cross they carried now transforms into a banner. The hidden object that blocked them becomes a testimony of liberation. The hidden pain that seemed unbearable transforms into fuel to lift the fallen, to open eyes, to ignite extinguished hearts. And here is the most powerful point. The deeper the silence was, the more resounding will be God's voice through you. Each night when you thought you were alone was actually a night of preparation. Each tear was an investment. Each loss was pruning, so that new fruits could emerge. You begin to realize that nothing was in vain. The closed doors were necessary detours. The rejections were invisible protections. The losses were deliverances. Silence was the language of a God who loves too much to deliver premature answers. Now the chosen one rises not only as a survivor but as a prophet, not only as someone who prayed, but as someone who understood the mysteries of silence. And their life becomes a lighthouse for others who still walk in the desert. The moment comes when the climax explodes inside the soul. It is as if all the weight of years of silence were suddenly broken. The hidden object no longer has power, the chains no longer hold, and the altar is purified. Heaven, which seemed closed, opens with force. You feel the answer not as human words, but as an invasion of light. It is as if every cell in the body understood at the same time that there was never abandonment. Silence was a hiding place. Pain was preparation. Loneliness was separation. This is the instant when tears become rivers of gratitude. You look back and realize that what you called loss was deliverance, that what you called silence was instruction, that what you called emptiness was gestation. The chosen one in this moment not only understands but embodies the revelation. Their life becomes a living answer. They no longer need external signs to believe, because they themselves have become a sign. Their testimony is a prophetic voice that echoes without needing a pulpit, without needing titles. Their presence carries the mark of election. And the most profound thing is that now their prayers flow like mighty rivers. Nothing blocks anymore, because the altar is clean. Heaven responds not only with blessings but with clear directions, with specific missions, with anointing that transforms environments. The final transformation is so powerful that the chosen one stops living for themselves. They understand that the entire process was so they could carry healing for others. The hidden pain that crushed them transforms into a key of liberation. The silence that seemed cruel transforms into spiritual authority. And that is why now I say to you, do not despise your silence. Do not curse your losses. Do not fear your loneliness. Because all of this is a seal. It is proof. It is evidence that you were marked for something greater. Rise today with the certainty that heaven has not forgotten you. It was just preparing you. The hidden object that blocked your prayer has been revealed. Now, nothing more can prevent the flow of the answer. And here is the call. If this message spoke to you, write in the comments right now, I am a chosen one. Declare this as a spiritual seal. Share this video with someone who still suffers in silence, so they too may discover the truth. Subscribe to this channel to continue receiving revelations that do not come from earth, but from heaven. Because this space is not just a channel, it is an altar where the chosen ones gather to remember that they are not alone, that they were not forgotten, that they were not rejected. You are not a victim of silence. You are a fruit of it. You are not a prisoner of pain. You are proof that pain was transformed into destiny. You are not marked by rejection. You are separated by election. And never forget, God's silence is not absence. It is construction. Pain is not a curse. It is preparation. The hidden object is not an enemy. It is a key. You are not forgotten. You are remembered. You are not common. You are chosen.